At dinner, my sister dumped water on me. 5 minutes to leave my house. My parents clapped. I wiped my face, smiled, and pulled out documents. Well then, you've got 5 minutes left to pray. The water was cold, much colder than I expected when I saw Victoria's hand fly up with the glass. It poured over my face, my hair, ran down the collar of my blouse, and I felt the drops running down my back. The silence in the room was deafening, only the quiet trickle of water dripping from my chin onto the linoleum. 5 minutes, Victoria hissed, leaning so close to me that I could smell her expensive perfume, to get out of my house. She straightened up, crossed her arms over her chest, and threw an empty glass on the table. The glass clinked against the plate. I blinked, brushed the water from my eyelashes, and looked at my parents. Mom Mary stood by the stove with a spatula in her hand, her face frozen, but her eyes showed agreement. Dad Johnson sat in his usual place at the head of the table, clapping his hands slowly and methodically. 1, 2, 3. The applause was loud in the silence. "Well done, daughter," he said, looking at Victoria, and there was no reproach in his voice. I wiped my face with a napkin that was lying on the table. The paper napkin became wet instantly, falling apart in my hands. I took a second one, then a third. The water remained on my neck, behind my ears, in my hair. I could feel my heart beating in my throat, but strangely, I did not cry. I didn't scream. I didn't even tremble. Inside, there was a strange numbness, as if I were watching this scene from the sidelines. "Lara," my mother began, and there was a note of uncertainty in her voice. "Maybe it really is better for you to leave. You ruined the evening. You ruined the evening." I smiled. The corners of my lips turned up on their own, even though I felt empty inside. This evening was supposed to be a celebration. Victoria had been named Employee of the Month at the car dealership where she worked as a manager. When she called me 3 days ago, her voice trembled with excitement. "Lara, you have to come. Mom is making my favorite dish, and Dad bought champagne. It's such a big event." I came. Of course I came. I always came when they called me, even if I had to change my shift at work, even if I was exhausted after a 12-hour shift at the nursing home. I showed up at 7 in the evening with a bouquet of flowers for Victoria and a bottle of wine. I stood at the door, waiting to be let in because the doorbell hadn't worked for 6 months and Dad never had time to fix it. Victoria opened the door in a new burgundy satin dress with perfect makeup and hairstyle. She looked gorgeous. I have to give her that. 26 years old, and she knew how to present herself. A new necklace sparkled around her neck, which I guessed her parents had bought her as a gift. "Oh, you came," she said, as if surprised, even though she had invited me herself. Dinner started off well. Mom had cooked duck with apples, Victoria's favorite dish. The table was laden with food, mashed potatoes, fresh vegetable salad, homemade pies that Mom only baked for special occasions. Dad opened a beer and poured himself and Victoria some champagne. He didn't offer me any. I poured myself some water from a glass on the table. Victoria talked about her achievements, how she sold 5 cars in a week, how management recognized her personally, how she was promised a promotion by the end of the year. "It's just incredible," she chirped, and Mom nodded, smiled, and served her the best pieces of duck. "You're our smart girl," Mom said, stroking Victoria's hand. "I always knew you would be successful. You're so determined." Dad talked about his plumbing repair company and how he had received 2 new orders this week. He mentioned that one customer had left a 5-star review, which had boosted his business's rating. "You have to work smart," he lectured, although it was directed more at me than anyone else. "Don't just do what others tell you to do. Build something of your own." I listened, ate, and tried to look interested. In reality, I was thinking about Mrs. Clarissa, who wasn't feeling well today, and I was worried if she was okay. The old woman had complained of chest pain before I finished my shift, and I asked the nurse on duty to keep a close eye on her. I was thinking about the fact that I had to pay for my apartment in 3 days, and I would have just enough if I didn't spend money on unnecessary things. I was thinking about how tired I was and how I just wanted to go to bed. Lara, are you even listening to me? Victoria turned sharply to me. I flinched and looked up. Yes, of course, you were talking about sales. I asked if you were proud of me. She narrowed her eyes. Yes, I replied. It's a good result. A good result? Victoria repeated, her voice turning steely. Just a good result? I put down my fork. Something tightened in my stomach. I knew that tone. I knew what was coming. Victoria, I wanted to say that it's wonderful. I'm happy for you. It doesn't seem like it, my mother interjected. You're sitting there with a look on your face like you don't belong here. I glanced at her. It was unfair, but there was no point in arguing. I never had a say in this house. I'm sorry, I'm just tired. I had a hard shift. You always have a hard shift, Dad grumbled, biting off a piece of bread. Other people work too, but they don't walk around with sour faces like that. Something inside me snapped. Maybe it was fatigue. Maybe it was pent-up resentment. Maybe it was just the fact that I had come here after 12 hours on my feet, switching shifts for this evening, and I was being treated as if I owed them something. I'm sorry, I said, and my voice sounded more even than I had hoped. It's just that I think gathering the whole family for the Employee of the Month award is a bit much. But I mean, well, Victoria, I'm happy for you. Silence fell over the room like a blanket. Victoria looked at me, her face slowly turning red. Mom slammed the pot down on the stove. Dad frowned and put down his fork with a loud clatter. What did you say? Victoria whispered. I said, I'm happy for you, I repeated, trying to stay calm. No, you said it's too much, that my award is a trifle, not worth gathering the family for. I realized I had crossed the line, but it was too late to back down. That's not what I meant. You're always like this, Victoria exclaimed, standing up abruptly. The chair behind her scraped across the floor. You always try to belittle my achievements. You're jealous, aren't you? Because you're still a useless nurse in a nursing home, and I've achieved something. The words hit me like slaps. I clenched the napkin in my hand, feeling something inside me crack. Victoria, I didn't mean to offend you. I'm really happy for you. Shut up, she shouted, grabbing a glass of water from the table. I saw her swing it, but I didn't have time to dodge. The water hit me right in the face. Cold and sharp, it flooded my eyes and nose and ran down my neck. I sat motionless, blinking, trying to comprehend what had just happened. And then these words rang out. You have 5 minutes to get out of my house. And Dad's applause, and Mom's approving nod. And I realized, to them, I had always been a stranger. Always. No matter how hard I tried, no matter how often I visited, helped, or adapted, I was never part of their family. I was an outsider. I slowly wiped my face, feeling the water running down my collar. My blouse stuck to my back. My hair felt unpleasantly cold against my skin. I bent down, picked up my bag from the floor, and unzipped it. I took out the thick brown folder I had been carrying with me for 2 weeks, waiting for the right moment. It seemed that moment had come. I placed the folder on the table, right between the plates of duck and salad. I opened it slowly, methodically. I pulled out the first sheet, then the second. The silence was palpable. You have 5 minutes, I said quietly, looking Victoria straight in the eye, to pray. Dad was the first to react. He leaned forward, squinting, trying to make out what was written on the paper. What is this nonsense? He muttered. I smiled, cold, detached, just as they had taught me all my life, to hide my emotions, not to show weakness. It's not nonsense, Dad. These are documents, official documents, and they concern each of you. I remember the day when everything finally started to fall apart. It was 6 months ago in July when the heat was so intense that the asphalt melted underfoot. Dad threw a big party for his 49th birthday. He invited the whole family, his friends, even a few clients he had been friends with for years. Victoria came in a new dress which, as I later found out, my mother had bought her especially for the occasion. I came in my usual jeans and blouse, because I didn't know it was going to be so fancy. The yard was decorated with garlands, there were snacks on the tables, my dad was grilling sausages, and my mom was rushing around with glasses and plates. Victoria was beaming as she told everyone about her work and how she had recently sold a luxury car to a businessman. The guests listened, nodded, and praised her. I stood to the side with a plastic cup of lemonade in my hand, trying not to draw attention to myself. "Lara!" Dad called me, waving his hand. "Come here and meet Wade. He's an old friend of mine. We went to school together." I approached and smiled. Wade was a heavy-set man in his 50s, with red hair and a kind face. "This is my eldest," Dad said, and there was no pride in his voice, just a statement of fact. "She works as a nurse in a nursing home." "Oh, a noble profession," said Wade, and I could tell he was sincere. "My mother spent her last years in such a facility. The nurses there are real angels." I wanted to thank him, but Dad interrupted. "Well, I don't know about angels. Lara has always been so practical. Not like Victoria. Look at the younger one. She's beautiful, smart, building a career. And this one," he waved his hand in my direction, "this one just lives as it comes." Wade laughed awkwardly, and I clenched the glass in my hand. Dad had already turned away and called someone else. I walked back to the edge of the yard where the old apple tree grew. I stood there, trying to swallow the lump in my throat. But the worst part was what happened later, when it was dark and the guests had had a few drinks. Victoria was the center of attention, telling another story about her clients, and everyone was laughing. I was sitting on a bench by the table when suddenly my mother came up to me with a plate of salad. "Here, eat this," she said, placing the plate in front of me. "You've lost weight." "You don't look well." "Thanks," I mumbled. "And anyway," my mother continued, sitting down next to me, "maybe you should take better care of yourself? Look at Victoria. She's always well-groomed, always in shape. And you, well, you know." I knew. I always knew. In the evening, when I was about to leave, Dad stopped me at the gate. "Listen, Lara," he began, and I immediately sensed that something unpleasant was coming. "You understand that things aren't easy for us, right? Financially, I mean. Business is going well, but there are a lot of expenses. Victoria still lives with us. We have to help her." I waited. I knew what was coming next. "So if you could, well, chip in a little money sometimes. Not much, you understand, just to help out." I looked at him and didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He was asking me for money. Me, who was barely making ends meet on a nurse's salary. Me, who rented a tiny apartment and ate pasta 3 times a week to save money. "Dad, I don't have any money myself," I said quietly. "How can you not?" "You work." "Yes, I work. And it's barely enough for rent and food." He frowned as if I had said something offensive. "Well, then think about getting another job. Other people are busy and you—" He didn't finish, waved his hand and went back to the guests. I stood at the gate for another 5 minutes, looking at the light streaming from the windows of the house. My house, the one where I grew up. And I felt that this place had never belonged to me. I went home and cried all night. The next morning, when I came to work, my eyes were red, and Mrs. Clarissa, my favorite ward, immediately asked what had happened. "Nothing," I replied, adjusting her pillow. "Just didn't sleep well." Mrs. Clarissa looked at me with her wise gray eyes and took my hand. "Child, I've lived long enough to tell the difference between someone who just slept badly and someone who cried all night. What happened?" I sat on the edge of the bed and told her everything. About my parents, about Victoria, about how I was always put second, about how they asked me for money even though they hired a cleaning lady because my mother didn't want to clean the house herself after I left. Mrs. Clarissa listened attentively without interrupting. When I finished, she nodded. You know, Laro, I had a family like that too. My father loved my brother more than me. My brother always got the best. Better food, better clothes, more attention. And I was just a girl who had to sit quietly and not get in the way. I tried for a long time to earn their love. A very long time. Until I realized that you can't earn something they don't want to give you. I looked at her, and my breath caught in my throat. And what did you do? I left. I got married and moved to another city. I rarely saw my parents. And you know what? I don't regret it. Because I built my own life. Mine. Not theirs. Mrs. Clarissa's words sank into my soul. I thought about them all day, all night. And the days that followed, too. That's when I decided to find out the truth about my grandmother's inheritance. Grandma Eleanor died 3 years ago, but I never saw the will. My parents said she left everything to them, and I had no reason not to believe them. But something bothered me. My grandmother loved me. She always said that I was special, that I was strong. Could she really have left me nothing? I started looking for information. First, I just Googled how to find out about inheritance. Then I found a free legal consultation at a charity foundation. I made an appointment. I went there on one of my days off. The lawyer was a young man of about 35 named Marcus Jenkins. He had dark hair, glasses, and the tired face of someone who works too much for too little money. "Tell me about your situation," he said, opening his laptop. I told him about my grandmother, how she died, and how my parents said that they had inherited everything. Marcus listened attentively, nodding from time to time. "And you want to know if you really didn't inherit anything?" "Yes." "Okay, I can submit a request to the notary who drew up the will. It will take a few weeks. Are you willing to wait?" I nodded. The wait was exhausting. Every day I thought about what they would find, if they would find anything at all. Maybe my parents were telling the truth, and my grandmother really had left everything to them. Maybe I was just imagining problems out of thin air. But after 3 weeks, Marcus called me. "Laura, we need to meet as soon as possible." I went to his office the next day. Marcus was sitting at his desk with a pile of papers in front of him, and his face was serious. "Sit down," he said, and I sat down. "What did you find?" He took a deep breath. "I found your grandmother's will, and it clearly states that her house, where your parents now live, was divided between 4 heirs. Your father, your mother, you, and your sister. 25% for each." I froze. "What? 25% of the house belongs to you, Lara. By law. By will. But my parents said..." "Your parents reissued the documents. They submitted a statement to the notary claiming that you had renounced your inheritance. Your signature is on it." "My signature? I didn't sign anything." Marcus nodded. "That's why it's a crime. Forgery of documents and misappropriation of someone else's property. You have every right to go to court or demand compensation." I sat there trying to digest this information. My parents, my own parents, forged my signature to take my share of the inheritance. How much is this house worth? Marcus leafed through the papers. According to the latest appraisal, approximately $400,000. Your share is $100,000. $100,000. It was money I never even dreamed of. It was an opportunity to buy my own apartment, not rent one. It was recognition that I, too, had a right to something in this family. "What should I do?" I asked quietly. "You can demand payment of your share, or force them to sell the house and divide the money, or sue them for forgery. The choice is yours." I went home in a daze. I sat on the floor of my tiny apartment all evening, looking out the window at the city at night. I thought. I weighed my options. I had doubts. This is my family, my parents. Can I do this to them? Can I demand money that might force them to sell the house? But then I remembered my father's birthday. I remembered how he asked me for money, even though he had denied me my inheritance. I remembered all those years when I was put second. I remembered the water on my face and my dad's applause, and I realized I have a right. I have a right to my share. I have a right to respect. And if they don't want to give it to me willingly, I'll take it myself. I called Marcus the next day. I want to claim my payment, I said firmly. $100,000, my money. Are you sure? Yes, absolutely. Marcus prepared all the documents. We drew up an official claim, gathered evidence of the forged signature, and made sure everything was legally correct. I carried those papers in my bag for 2 weeks, waiting for the right moment. And then it came, the evening when Victoria poured water on my head, when my parents applauded her in support, when I was called an outsider in my own home. I took out the folder and put it on the table, and I felt something inside me change. I was no longer that submissive girl who kept quiet and endured. I was a woman who knew her worth. "You have 5 minutes," I repeated, looking at their stunned faces, "to pray. Because after that, your life will change forever." Dad took the first sheet of paper and squinted as he read. I saw his face gradually change color, from its usual pink to red, then to some kind of unhealthy burgundy shade. Mom came closer and looked over his shoulder. Victoria froze, still holding the empty glass in her hand. "What is this?" Dad finally said, his voice trembling. "Where did you get this?" "From the notary's office," I replied calmly, wiping the last drops of water from my neck. "Through an official request from my lawyer." "Your lawyer?" Mom repeated, a high-pitched note of panic creeping into her voice. "You have a lawyer?" "Yes, Marcus Jenkins from the Legal Aid Charity. A very competent man, by the way. He knows his stuff." I sat back down in my chair and put my hands on the table. My hair was still wet and drops of water were dripping onto my shoulders. But I didn't care. I felt a strange clarity of mind that I hadn't felt in many years. Dad threw the paper on the table and slammed his fist on the wooden surface. The plates rattled. "This is nonsense! Grandma left the house to us, to you and your mother." "That's not true," I said quietly but clearly. "Grandma Eleanor left the house to 4 people. 25% to you, 25 to Mom, 25 to Victoria, and 25 to me. It's written in the official will, certified by a notary. Everything is legal. Everything is clear." Victoria finally put down the glass and walked over to the table, grabbing one of the sheets of paper. This must be some kind of mistake," she stammered, quickly scanning the lines. "It can't say that." "That's exactly what it says," I interrupted. "And you have your share too, Victoria. 25%, just like me." Mom fell into a chair and pressed her hand to her mouth. Her eyes filled with tears. "Laura, how could you? How could you do this to us? We're your family." I looked at her and something tightened in my chest, but I didn't back down. "Family? You call yourselves family? You who just applauded when water was poured on me? Who kicked me out of the house? Who put me last my whole life?" "Don't exaggerate," Dad grumbled. "We always cared about you." "No," I said, my voice firming. "You took care of Victoria. You took care of yourselves, but not me. Never." I took another piece of paper from the folder and placed it on the table in front of Dad. "This is a copy of the inheritance waiver I supposedly signed 3 years ago, right after Grandma died. But here's the problem. I never signed anything like that. I didn't even know such a document existed." Dad tried to take the paper, but his hands were shaking. Mom sobbed louder. "My lawyer had the signature examined," I continued, "and it turned out to be forged. It's not my handwriting. This is a crime, in case you didn't know. Forgery of documents and illegal appropriation of someone else's property. You can't prove that," Dad muttered, but his voice sounded uncertain. "I can, and I will, if I have to. I have an expert opinion. I have the original documents. I have witnesses. I have everything I need to take this to court. And believe me, Dad, I will do it if you don't meet my demands." Victoria turned sharply to me, her face contorted with anger. "What demands? Do you want money? Of course you do. because you've always been greedy. You've always envied me. Envied me because I'm prettier, more successful, because people love me. I looked at her, and suddenly I felt like laughing. I would have laughed if the situation hadn't been so tragic. Jealous? Victoria, I've never been jealous of you. It hurt me that I wasn't loved as much as you were. But jealous? No, you're lying, she shouted. You always tried to hurt me. You always ruined my holidays, my achievements, and now, too, you want to destroy our family. I'm not destroying the family, I said quietly. You did that 3 years ago when you decided to steal my inheritance. Silence. Even Victoria fell silent. Mom cried, covering her face with her hands. Dad looked at me with a mixture of hatred and fear. I took the last document from the folder and placed it on top of the rest. This is an appraisal of the house's value, done by an independent expert 2 weeks ago. The market value is $402,000. My share is 25%. That's $100,500. We don't have that kind of money, Dad exclaimed. Where would we get that kind of money? That's not my problem, I replied coldly. You had 3 years to deal with the inheritance honestly. You decided to steal my share. Now you have to pay up. Mom got up from the table and came over to me. Her face was red, tears streaming down her cheeks. Laura, my daughter, how can you do this? This is our home. If we give you that much money, we'll have to take out a loan or sell the house. I know, I said, and I'm sorry, but it's fair. Fair? Victoria came closer, her eyes burning. You want to throw us out on the street for the sake of your justice? I want to get what is mine by law, what my grandmother left me. She loved me. She wanted me to have a future. And you took that away from me. Dad stood up, his chair falling back with a crash. If you do this, he hissed, pointing his finger at me, you are no longer my daughter. Do you hear me? You will forever cease to be part of this family. I stood up and took the folder from the table. My hands weren't shaking. My voice wasn't shaking. I felt strangely calm. Dad, I was never part of this family. You made that clear to me a long time ago. I've just finally accepted that truth. I looked at the clock on the wall. It was already 10 o'clock in the evening. You have 2 weeks, I said. 14 days to find the money. $150,000. Transfer it to my account. The details are in the documents. If the money isn't there in 2 weeks, I'll start legal proceedings. And then, believe me, you will not only have to give me my share, but also pay court costs, fines for forging documents, and possibly even face criminal charges. Mom cried louder. Victoria froze, looking at me as if she were seeing me for the first time. Dad clenched his fists. His jaw moved, but he remained silent. I went to the door and took my jacket from the coat rack in the hallway. My hands automatically zipped it up, my brain working clearly and coldly. Behind me, I heard muffled voices and footsteps. "Laura!" Victoria called after me as I stood in the doorway. "Where did we get the money?" You know Dad is barely making ends meet with this plumbing company. I turned and looked at her. Victoria, you work at a car dealership. You sell cars for $50,000, $60,000, $70,000. You get commissions, you get a salary, you have savings, I know. You were saving up for your own apartment. Her eyes widened. You want me to give up my savings? I want you to find my money. How you do it is up to you. It's impossible. I can't. That's all I have. I felt a pang of sympathy, but quickly suppressed it. I remembered how she had just poured water on me, how they all laughed at me, humiliated me, put me last my whole life. Victoria, you have your share of the inheritance, 25%. You can claim it just like I can. It's your right. But it's my parents' house. Our house. Yes, and by law, part of it belongs to me, and to you too. I opened the door, and cold air hit my face. It was pleasant after the stuffy atmosphere of the house. 2 weeks, I repeated without turning around. Don't forget." I went out into the yard and heard the door close behind me. My old car was parked by the gate, illuminated by the dim light of a street lamp. I got in, started the engine, and drove away. In the rearview mirror, I could see the lights in the windows of the house. I could hear the panic, the arguments, the accusations unfolding inside, but I didn't care. I pulled onto the main road and turned on the radio. An old song was playing, about freedom and new beginnings. I was driving home, and for the first time in many years, I felt like I was doing the right thing. The next few days were strange. I went to work, looked after my charges, smiled, talked. But something had changed inside me. I had become more confident, more determined. Mrs. Clarissa noticed it right away. "Something happened, child?" she asked as I helped her with breakfast. "You look different." "Different?" "Stronger. As if you finally found yourself." I smiled and adjusted her pillow. "Maybe so." The phone started ringing the next day. First, it was my mother, crying and begging me to reconsider my decision. Then my dad, threatening, swearing, saying I'd regret it. Then Victoria, yelling, accusing, trying to make me feel guilty. I blocked all their numbers. Marcus warned me this would happen, that they would try to pressure, manipulate, intimidate me, but I had to hold on, and I did. A week passed, then 3 more days. I counted the hours until the end of the 2-week period. Part of me hoped they would find the money. Another part knew we would have to go to court. On the 12th day, late in the evening, someone knocked on my door. I went to the door and looked through the peephole. It was Victoria. She was standing alone, without her parents, her face looking tired and aged. I opened the door but didn't invite her in. "What do you want?" She looked at me, and there was no anger in her eyes anymore, only a kind of emptiness. "I found the money," she said quietly. "I had $63,000 in savings. I took out a loan for the rest. My parents added what they could. Tomorrow morning, the money will be in your account." I stood motionless, not knowing what to say. "Are you satisfied?" Victoria asked, bitterness breaking through in her voice. "You got what you wanted." "You destroyed everything." "I didn't destroy anything," I said quietly. "I just took what was mine." She laughed, briefly and without joy. "What was yours?" "Yes." "Well, I hope it was worth it. I hope that money compensates you for the loss of your family." She turned and walked away. I watched her until she disappeared around the corner of the stairs. Then I closed the door, leaned my back against it, slowly slid down, and sat on the floor. I had won. But why did it hurt so much? The money arrived in my account the next day at exactly 9 in the morning. I received a message from the bank while riding the bus to work. $150,000. I stared at the numbers on my phone screen and felt nothing. No joy, no relief, just a kind of emptiness. Mrs. Clarissa met me in the hallway of the nursing home when I came in for my shift. "Good morning, child," she said from her wheelchair. She was accompanied by a young nurse named Taylor. "You look tired." "I didn't get much sleep," I replied, helping Taylor wheel the wheelchair into the dining room. "Didn't get much sleep or didn't sleep at all?" Mrs. Clarissa narrowed her eyes. She always saw everything. Sometimes I thought the old woman could read my mind. After breakfast, as I helped her back to her room, she took my hand. "Tell me." "What happened?" I sat on the edge of her bed and told her about dinner, about the water on my face, about the documents, about the money already in my account. Mrs. Clarissa listened silently, nodding from time to time. "And now you feel guilty," she said when I finished. "Yes. I don't know why. I had the right. It was my money. Of course you had the right. But that doesn't mean it doesn't hurt." I looked at her, and suddenly my eyes filled with tears. I cried for the first time since that evening. Mrs. Clarissa stroked my arm. "Child, you did the right thing, but the right things are sometimes the most painful. You set a boundary. You said, 'I deserve respect.' And that's scary, because now you're alone." Yes, I whispered through my tears. I'm alone. But it's better to be alone than to be with people who put you down. Trust an old woman, I know what I'm talking about. I wiped my eyes and took a deep breath. How did you cope? When you left your family? Mrs. Clarissa smiled sadly. It was hard at first. Very hard. I cried every night for the first month. But then I met my husband, and he became my real family. And later we had children, and I built a new life. A better life. Have you ever regretted it? No, never. And you won't regret it either. Give yourself time. I finished my shift and went home. In the evening, Marcus called. Laura, hello. Did you get the money? Yes. How are you feeling? I paused, trying to find the words. I don't know. I feel kind of empty. That's normal. You've just severed ties with your family. Give yourself time to get over it. Marcus, did you ever talk to your father after he left? He paused. No, he disappeared when I was 10. My mom said he moved to another state and started a new family. My sister and I stayed with my mom. She had to work 2 jobs to feed us. Did you miss him? At first, yes. I waited for him to come back every day, but he didn't come back. And after a while, I realized that someone who truly loves you doesn't disappear. They don't leave. They don't make you feel like you're not needed. His words echoed in my head long after we said goodbye. Someone who truly loves you doesn't leave. My parents left me emotionally many years ago. I just finally admitted it. The next few days I tried to live as usual. I went to work, cooked dinner, watched TV series before bed. But everything felt wrong. It was as if I existed in some kind of limbo, no longer there, but not yet here. My phone was silent. No calls from my parents or Victoria. I unblocked their numbers after a week, but they didn't call. The silence was louder than any words. One evening, when I was coming home from work, I saw a familiar figure at the entrance to my building, Victoria. She was standing against the wall wearing jeans and an old jacket. She looked different. No makeup, her hair down, tired. Hi, she said when I approached. Hi. We stood there in silence. I didn't know what to say. Neither did she, apparently. Can I come in? Victoria finally asked. I need to talk to you. I hesitated, but nodded. We went up the stairs, and I opened the door to my small apartment. Victoria looked around. One room, a small kitchen, old furniture. Do you live here? She asked quietly. Yes, for 4 years now. I didn't know it was so cramped. I went into the kitchen and put the kettle on. Would you like some tea? Yes, please. We sat down at the small table. I poured tea into 2 cups and pushed one toward her. Victoria wrapped her hands around the cup and watched the steam rise. I came to tell you, she began, then fell silent. I don't know how to say it. Just say it. She looked up and I saw something new in her eyes. Shame, perhaps, or understanding. I knew, she said quietly, about the will, about your share. I froze with the cup in my hands. What? A year ago, when I wanted to buy an apartment, I asked my parents to lend me money. They said they couldn't. I got angry and said that they always buy me everything, so why are they refusing now? And then my mother told me the truth about Grandma's will, about the fact that formally there are 2 other owners of the house, you and me. But they transferred everything to themselves, forging your signature. I didn't breathe. I just listened. They told me they did it for our own good, that you wouldn't be able to manage the money wisely, that you would lose it, that it was better this way, and that my share was also theirs, but when I was ready, they would help me with housing. And you agreed, I said emotionlessly. Yes, Victoria whispered, I agreed. Because it was convenient for me. Because I was used to getting everything I wanted. I didn't think about you. I didn't think it was unfair. She cried quietly, pressing her palms to her face. I'm so ashamed, Lara. So ashamed. I was selfish. I've always been selfish. and I understand why you did what you did." I sat motionless, trying to digest what I had heard. Victoria knew. She had known all along. "Why did you come here?" I finally asked. "What do you want?" I don't know." She wiped her eyes with her palm. "I want to explain, or apologize, or just say that you were right." "I was right? About what exactly?" "Everything. My parents always treated you badly. I saw it, but I liked being the favorite. I liked the attention, and I never stood up for you, even when I should have." She took a deep breath. "After that night, after I threw water on you, my parents said you were bad, that you had betrayed the family, but I knew that wasn't true. You just took what was yours, and I had to pay for it." "How much?" I asked. "How much did you have to give?" $63,000, my savings, everything I'd saved for 3 years. Plus, I took out a loan for $37,000. I'll be paying it off for 5 years. I felt a pang of guilt, but quickly suppressed it. "It was my money, Victoria. My share of the inheritance. I know, I don't blame you, I blame myself. And my parents." She raised her head and looked me in the eyes. "After we gave you the money, my parents started blaming me. They said I should have come up with something, somehow persuaded you to refuse. Mom yelled that I was selfish, that because of me, we lost so much money. Dad didn't talk to me for 3 days. She laughed bitterly. And you know what's funny? I realized that for them, I was just a tool too. As long as I was convenient, beautiful, successful, they loved me. But when I couldn't solve their problem, they turned away from me, just like they did with you." I listened, and something in my chest relaxed. Victoria felt it too, maybe differently, but she felt it. "Do you feel sorry for me?" she asked quietly. "No," I replied honestly. "I don't feel sorry for you. But I understand that it was hard for you too, just in a different way." She nodded. "I'm not asking you to forgive me. I'm not even asking us to be sisters again. I just wanted you to know that I understand. And you were right." She finished her tea and stood up. "I have to go." "Thank you for letting me in." I walked her to the door. Victoria was already leaving when I called out to her. "Victoria!" She turned around. "I didn't destroy the family." "It was destroyed when I was first called unnecessary. Remember that." She nodded, and I saw that she understood. Finally understood. When the door closed, I stood in the hallway staring at the old carpet under my feet. Something had changed. Not everything, but something. The next day, I met Marcus at a coffee shop near my house. He had suggested it a week ago. Just coffee, no business talk. I agreed. "How are you?" he asked when we sat down at a table by the window. "Strange," I replied honestly. "I have money I never had before, but I don't have a family anymore. Did you ever have one? A real family?" I thought about it. Probably not. I just didn't want to admit it. Marcus nodded. "I understand. I had to go through that too. When my father left, I couldn't accept for a long time that he just didn't love us, me and my sister. I made up excuses, told myself that he would definitely come back, but he didn't come back. And after a while, I realized it was his choice. It wasn't my fault." "Are you in touch with your mother?" I asked. "Yes. She's a wonderful woman. She raised us on her own, working 2 jobs. She gave us an education and support. That's what a real family is. People who stay when times are tough." We talked for another hour about life, work, and dreams. Marcus told me he dreams of opening his own law firm where he would help people for free or for a nominal fee. I told him that I once wanted to become a doctor but didn't have the money for school. "And now?" he asked. "Do you still want to?" I thought about it. I'm 28. Medical school would take years, but now I have the money. "I don't know," I admitted. "Maybe it's too late." "It's never too late," Marcus said. My mom was 40 when she graduated from college. She worked as a waitress while we were growing up. Then, when we went to college, she decided to get an education. Now she teaches at a school, and she's happy. His words touched my soul. Maybe I really do have a chance to start over. As we said goodbye outside the coffee shop, Marcus smiled. "You're a strong woman, Laura. Remember that." I walked home, and for the first time in many weeks, I felt something like hope. I have money, I have freedom, I have the opportunity to build a new life. But first, I had to learn to live with the fact that my family was gone. And that was the hardest part. For the first month after the money arrived in my account, I lived in a strange state of limbo. I went to work, did my job, smiled at patients, but inside, there was an emptiness that I couldn't fill with anything. My colleagues noticed that something was wrong. Taylor, a young nurse with whom we often worked the same shift, asked me once during our lunch break, "Laura, are you okay? You seem kind of absent lately." "Everything's fine," I replied automatically. "I'm just a little tired." She didn't believe me, it was obvious, but she didn't insist. People rarely insist when you don't want to talk. They accept your answer and move on. Mrs. Clarissa was different. She didn't accept my excuses. "Child," she said one morning as I was helping her get dressed, "you carry your pain like a heavy bag. Put it down, at least for a minute." I paused, holding her cardigan in my hands. "I don't know how." Start with a small step. Do something for yourself, something you've always wanted but never allowed yourself to do. Her words spun around in my head all day. What did I want? What did I really want for myself? In the evening, I sat in my rented apartment, looking at the walls that were never mine, at the old furniture left by the previous tenant, at the faded curtains that I didn't even try to replace, because why bother if it's not mine? And suddenly, I realized, I want a home, a real home, my own. The next day, I started looking for apartments for sale, not for rent, but for sale. I had $100,000. That would be enough for the down payment and even for some minor repairs. I looked through the ads every evening after work. Most of the apartments were either too expensive, in terrible condition, or in areas where I didn't want to live. But after 2 weeks, I found what I was looking for. A small one-bedroom apartment on the 3rd floor of an old brick building. The neighborhood was quiet, green, and far from my parents' house. The apartment needed repairs, but it was bright, with large windows and a low price, $130,000. I arranged a viewing. I arrived on Saturday morning with the realtor, a heavy-set woman in her 50s named Gloria. "The previous owners moved to another state," Gloria explained as she unlocked the door. "The apartment has been empty for 3 months. They are willing to negotiate if you are a serious buyer." We went inside and I froze. A large window overlooked the park. The sun flooded the room with warm light. The floor was old, the wallpaper was peeling in places, and the tiles in the kitchen needed to be replaced. But something about this place felt right. "I'll take it," I said suddenly. Gloria raised her eyebrows in surprise. "Are you sure? Maybe you want to think about it some more? Look at other options?" "No, I want this one." We started filling out the paperwork. It turned out that the owners were indeed willing to lower the price to $120,000 if I bought the apartment quickly. I made a down payment of $70,000 and took out a mortgage for the rest. A month later, the keys were in my hands. I stood in the middle of the empty room, holding the keys in my palm, and for the first time in many months, I felt something like joy. It's mine, really mine. The renovation took 2 months. I hired professionals for the big jobs, replacing the flooring, new tiles in the kitchen. But I painted the walls myself on the weekends. I chose light colors, beige for the living room, mint for the kitchen. I bought new curtains and simple but comfortable furniture. Nothing expensive, but everything was new, everything I chose myself. Mrs. Clarissa was delighted when I told her about the renovation. "You see, child, you are building your life. Your real life." I moved into my new apartment at the end of March. Spring was just beginning, and the trees in the park were covered with young leaves. I unpacked boxes, put things in their places, and for the first time in many years, I felt at home. At work, life was also gradually falling into place. Taylor invited me to dinner at her house, where I met her husband and young son. We sat in their kitchen, ate pizza, and laughed at silly jokes. I felt like I was part of something. Not a family in the traditional sense, but a community. Marcus wrote to me from time to time. At first, he just asked how I was doing. Then we started meeting for coffee once every 2 weeks. We talked about everything: work, books, life. He told me about his sister who had just graduated from college and was looking for a job. I told him about my clients, especially Mrs. Clarissa. "She reminds me of my grandmother," I confessed once. "The same wisdom, the same understanding." "Your grandmother was a special person," Marcus said. "She took care of you even after she died." "Yes, she was the only one who truly loved me." We sat in silence, finishing our coffee. Then Marcus asked, "Have you heard anything from your family?" "No, complete silence. It's been almost 6 months." "How do you feel about that?" I thought for a moment. "Sometimes it hurts, but mostly, I feel relieved. I don't expect anything from them anymore, and that's liberating." He nodded understandingly. The 6 months after that dinner passed quickly and slowly at the same time. Quickly, because every day was filled with things to do: work, renovations, setting up a new life. Slowly, because sometimes, especially in the evenings, I would sit in my new apartment and feel this emptiness. My family was gone. My parents didn't call. Victoria was silent. And then one day, in early October, when the leaves in the park had already begun to turn yellow, I received a message from Victoria. "Can we meet?" I stared at those 3 words for 5 minutes. Part of me wanted to ignore it. Another part was curious. What did she want? Why after so many months of silence? I replied, "Where and when?" We agreed to meet at a neutral cafe in the city center, not near her parents' house, not near my new apartment, somewhere in between. I arrived 15 minutes before the appointed time, ordered coffee, and sat down at a table by the window. I waited, trying to calm my heartbeat. I didn't know what to expect. Victoria showed up at exactly 3 o'clock. I almost didn't recognize her. She had lost weight and looked older than her 26 years. Her hair was tied back in a simple ponytail. She wore no makeup, jeans, and a simple sweater. Nothing like the glamorous girl who had poured water on my head. "Hi," she said quietly, sitting down across from me. "Hi." We were silent. The waitress approached, and Victoria ordered tea. When the waitress left, Victoria looked at me. "Thank you for agreeing to meet." "What do you want, Victoria?" She took a deep breath. "I don't know, to be honest. Maybe just to talk, maybe explain, or just see you." I waited. She twisted the napkin in her hands. "After that, after we gave you the money, everything changed. My parents started blaming me. They said I should have done something, talked you out of it, found a way out. Mom screamed that we lost so much money because of me. Dad didn't talk to me for a week. She looked up, and I saw the exhaustion in her eyes. I tried to fix everything. I worked harder, took extra shifts to pay off the loan faster, but they didn't care. They kept blaming me. And I realized that to them, I was just a tool too." "What do you mean?" "As long as I was convenient, useful, beautiful, successful, they loved me. They praised me, supported me. But when I couldn't solve their problem with you, they turned away, just like they once turned away from you." She hid her face in her hands. "I'm so ashamed, Lara. All my life, I didn't notice how they treated you, how they humiliated you, ignored you. It was convenient for me to be the favorite. I didn't want to see it." I sat silently, looking at my sister. She cried quietly, trying not to attract the attention of the other visitors to the cafe. "I'm not asking you to forgive me," she said finally, wiping her eyes. "I don't even know if I deserve forgiveness. I just wanted you to know that I understand now, and you were right about everything." The waitress brought our tea. Victoria thanked her and took the cup with trembling hands. "How are you?" she asked. "How's your life?" "Different," I replied honestly. "I bought an apartment." "My own? I renovated it. I live alone. Are you happy?" I thought for a moment. "I don't know if you can call it happiness, but I feel calm for the first time in many years." Victoria nodded. "I'm happy for you. Really." We talked for another hour. Not about our parents, not about that dinner, about other things, about work, about life, about little things. Victoria said she was thinking about changing jobs, that she was tired of the car dealership. I told her about Mrs. Clarissa, about how she taught me to see the true value of things. When we said goodbye at the coffee shop, Victoria asked, Can we see each other sometimes?" Not like before, but differently, more honestly. I thought about it. Part of me wanted to say no, to protect myself from possible pain, but another part saw something new in Victoria. Vulnerability, understanding, an attempt to change. "We can try," I finally said, "but it has to be different. Honest, no manipulation. I promise." She held out her hand and we shook hands. I walked home, feeling a strange mixture of emotions. Forgiveness? No, not yet, but maybe the beginning of something. An opportunity to build a new relationship, not based on old resentments. In the evening, I sat on the windowsill of my apartment with a cup of hot coffee in my hands. It started raining outside, the drops running down the glass, blurring the light from the street lamps. The room was warm and cozy. My music played quietly in the background. My things were in their places. My home. I thought about these 6 months, about how much had changed, about how family isn't necessarily the people you were born with. Sometimes it's the people you choose. Mrs. Clarissa Taylor Marcus. They were my real family now. The money I received did not compensate for the lack of love. It did not automatically make me happier, but it gave me something more important. Recognition of my right to a place in this world. Recognition that I am worth something, that my life matters. Sometimes you have to cut off rotten ties in order to grow. It hurts, it's scary, but it's necessary. My phone vibrated, a message from Marcus. "Hi, want to grab coffee tomorrow? I found a new place you might like." I smiled as I typed my reply. Why not? The rain outside intensified, but here, in my home, it was warm, and for the first time in many years, I wasn't afraid of the future. It was unknown, but it was my unknown, my life, my choice. I put my cup on the windowsill and hugged my knees. I watched the rain and thought about how there was still a lot of time ahead of me. Time to heal my wounds, time to build new relationships, time to become who I wanted to be. Grandma Eleanor would be proud of me, I know that. She always said I was strong, that I was special. And now I was finally starting to believe it myself. Life wasn't perfect. It wasn't a fairy tale with a happy ending, but it was mine, truly mine. And that was the most precious thing I had.